need to be able to direct our outrage in the right place. We need strong leadership. The African National Congress is not that leadership. Sovereignty ulambile. Tomorrow, the ANC will be running to IMF to go beg for money because they're trying to shove tax, VAT increase, all of that. So it's just completely pointless. So apart from keeping up with the VAT increase story following the teaser that we got about 2 weeks ago, it felt like a teaser. It was definitely not a great teaser, because the realization that VAT could have or potentially would go up by 2%, and talks of even further increase on other taxes just is not a good story. So I've just been keeping an eye on those developments. In fact, I'm recording this video on a Saturday, and I just saw on Twitter that the Sunday Times is dropping a story tomorrow, which is going to be the 2nd of March. They're dropping a piece around the fact that the ANC allegedly is said to support a 2% VAT increase. I'm assuming the discussions are underway. Very interesting update there. So apart from keeping up with that and just following whatever the finance minister has been saying in the news headlines, I've also just been looking at the story, which has been, I think, a major story for South Africa this week. Very much a big story, of the fact that the Solidarity movement, as well as AfriForum, visiting the United States to submit a memorandum to Washington, or rather to the Trump administration. The memorandum listing a whole lot of things that they are seeking help with, or in the words of what the memorandum has listed, because I was just looking at that now, they are saying they want the United States to intervene and to put pressure on the African National Congress to meet a couple of recommendations that they've listed. And of course, this kind of story did set up a whole firestorm on Twitter, and there was just a lot of back and forth. I'm going to highlight 2 responses here from, I'd say, sort of prominent figures in our media space, social media in particular. One is Dumisole. He's quite big on Twitter, but I think he also does sort of have a bit of a tie to politics somewhat. He does share his opinion sometimes. And the other is Faith Mangope. I'm also going to highlight her response to the AfriForum and Solidarity delegation visiting the United States. To read Dumisolo, to quote Dumisole's tweet, what he said was, AfriForum and Solidarity are on a treasonous tour in the United States or USA. Some of the recommendations in their memo are nothing but treason! Exclamation mark. Firstly, let me start with the admission in their own document at paragraph 3.25, putting a case why land reform is important and necessary. He quotes the part where they say that traditionally Afrikaners are also a farming community, and almost 75% of commercial farmers are Afrikaners. Treason examples in the form of recommendations, as they call them, on foreign policy, pressure in South Africa to be sustained, on Afrikaners in South Africa. Afrikaners be given some piece of land at the southern tip of Africa for Afrikaners only. Money be given to them to beef up the security as the Afrikaners. On expropriation, pressure government and force it to give an undertaking that constitution will not be amended to allow for expropriation. On Bella Act, so-called Afrikaner schools must be allowed to determine their own language and admission policies. On racial laws, U.S. government to pressure South Africa to commit that racial laws will be phased out, BE and others, the CBD of these Afrikaners. And you know what, I do have a couple of points, not that I disagree with Dumisole, no jab at him from a personal point of view, but one, he says here that this whole thing about them saying that almost 75% of commercial farmers are owned by Afrikaners, I don't think this was in response, if you look at the memorandum, to the question of why land reform is necessary. What the memorandum was speaking about, particularly on the point that he highlights, is that they were speaking about farm murders and what the Solidarity and the AfriForum movement believes is a problem, right? That there are killings that are happening in, for instance, the rural farm areas. And they were just saying that on top of that, because they are a larger portion of people who own the farms. I think that is just to substantiate why they feel like it's a target directly at them, because they are majority in South Africa of the people who own farms. They are 75%, make up 75% of people in South Africa who own farms. Just to basically highlight that farm murders being a problem is predominantly a problem that affects them the most, because they are predominantly the ones who own farms. Not necessarily to say that because of the fact that they own 75% of the commercial farms in South Africa, that land reform or whatever. I don't think Dumisole quoted that correctly. That's just the one point. And of course, the pressure on government, on foreign policy pressure in South Africa to be sustained, very important. I think it's not a very good reflection of what is in the statement, because AfriForum and Solidarity, their statement is US put pressure in leaders in South Africa. Leaders, the African National Congress, people that are mentioned in the Zondo Commission. Remember, that's what the memorandum, I quoted that as coming out of the memorandum. So one of the problems with this kind of sort of the way this message is relayed by Dumisole is that it's almost like it's an attack on South Africa. The same thing has happened in Zimbabwe. If you know Zimbabwe, many of us don't know much about the history and whatnot, but we just know that they are struggling economically wise or whatever, because they're under sanctions, right? That is the story that we tend to be told. In fact, those sanctions are imposed on leaders and individuals, particularly individuals. There's also sanctions on some state-owned enterprises because of their link to political leaders, because state-owned, state leaders and all of that. But it's not to say that Zimbabwe as a country is completely written off. And one of the main reasons why Zimbabwe's economy does not grow is because of the style of leadership that Zimbabwe has. One, very much on the dictatorship side, high corruption, and all of these policies that I speak against constantly in my channel. So in fact, I think it was Mike Sham. I'm going to link the full video where he was speaking about this very thing, that one of the things we need to be careful about when it comes to sanctions, or this sort of like pressure in South Africa be sustained, which would be a sanction essentially, is the political leaders will always spin this. They will always spin this to become a sort of a blockade or a sanction on South Africa and everyone in South Africa, when in actual fact it's a battle between the leaders. So the US leadership putting blockades on our own leaders, for example, saying to Ramaphosa, if you've got businesses, your businesses cannot trade with America. Not to say that if you're in South Africa and you maybe say you own a hair brand, you could very much still trade with America, because you are not in the sanction list as, for example, June Hlongwane. So very, very important that we understand, because one of the biggest issues that I have with the African National Congress is that they are good in PR. They are good at being spin doctors, and they're going to turn around and say, yeah, you see, it's because of Solidarity, it's because of AfriForum that we are sanctioned as South Africa, neglecting the fact that no, you as the leader are sanctioned for the decisions that you make. Remember, when the ANC makes its decisions, we are not in the room. We are not called. We are just told about it. Whether you support it at that time, you can say, yes, viva ANC, go for it. But at the end of the day, you're not behind that decision. They're not thinking, yeah, we're not involved, right? So very, very important distinction. And I think it's just one of those things that can just quickly go under the carpet, and then tomorrow when there's a rally again, they'll say, yeah, the US is so bad, they've sanctioned South Africa. No, they've sanctioned the EU for the issues that you have with the US, which half the time, at least 8% of the time, we are not involved. We're just bystanders, right? We're just the bystanders. Again, Dumisole, one of the things that I think he kind of downplays or undermines, if you want to put it like that, in this memorandum that the AfriForum and the Solidarity movement put out to the US, is so-called Afrikaner schools must be allowed to determine their own language and admission policies. Basically saying that, yeah, as part of these recommendations, Bella Act is one of them, right? Again, this tone from Dumisole almost saying that's irrelevant, or I don't know. The problem with the Bella Act is that it is just another one of these things that the African National Congress has put on the table to seem like they're fixing the problem. I think 2 weeks after the Bella Act was signed, and after the whole back and forth, Lokajano and all of that, what happened after that? We got a report from the Gauteng province that they now have to extend satellite classrooms because there wasn't enough classrooms to accommodate learners that are coming in or being admitted into the system for 2025. Okay, you ask yourself, okay, Bella Act was supposed to, why the Bella Act? Because clearly the problem is infrastructure. The problem is that there is not enough infrastructure. And you can put a lot of reasons as to why there's not enough infrastructure. Mismanagement of the funds and budgets is one of the main reasons, because the stories are there. The state capture report, we listened to some of those testimonies of how monies were just being moved and. But that's what happened 2 weeks after the Bella Act was approved. So I asked myself the question, then why the Bella Act? What is the purpose of the Bella Act then? Because if Bella Act is not going to benefit the education system, what is the point? They're like, no, not all parts of the Bella Act are bad. But the way in which they sold it to us, Bella Act was supposed to fix every single problem that we have with the education system. I also just want to read what Faith Mangwape said again in response to the delegation arriving in the United States. So her tweet says, "Wake up at President CZA. In South Africa, treason remains a common law offense. The crime of high treason is defined as any conduct unlawfully committed by a person owing allegiance to a state with the intention of overthrowing the government of the republic, coercing the government by violence into any action or inaction, violating, threatening, or endangering the existence of independence, security, and independence or security of the republic, changing the constitutional structure of the republic." And then she says, "I think it's time for South Africans to stand up against treason. When you go to America and spread lies about South Africa, which endangers the sovereignty of the state, it is treason!" Exclamation mark. No, thank you for that education, Faith Mangwape. I read this and I'm just like, it's politics at the end of the day. Because treason, well, she defined it exactly like it is. Perfect. However, you also have something called a coup. A coup, Faith Mangwape would be accepting of a coup because we get a lot of those in Africa. Every now and again, there's a coup. A coup is an act of treason. It's sort of in the same family, but when I look at it, I'm not saying I'm supporting treason, or I'm not saying I'm for treason, but I'm just saying this outrage, this, let's fight, this is bad. It's just like, wait a minute. You guys would be supportive of a coup. Didn't we have one recently? Is it DRC or was it Kenya? I'm having a bit of a blank there. One of the African countries staging a coup, and then we hail those. I think it was Kenya, where young people were protesting or were staging a coup against the government for tax or whatever. We hailed that as good. We say, yeah, go. And these guys go there. These solidarity people go to America, do their thing, and then we put a stop to this. They cannot overturn a government, but we support coups. Just to give my commentary before I conclude, wherever you fall in sort of like this conversation, I know for some it's a trigger, people get outraged and not to say that's good or bad. I'm not invalidating any of those particular feelings, but the reality is that South Africa has to grow. If it's AfriForum saying it, if it's Solidarity saying it, if it's true, anyone, the problem we have is that South Africa has to grow. I often hear a lot of talks about, fighting imperialist forces and, fighting neoliberal imperialism and all of that. And, now with this US sort of back and forth, this talks about, South Africa is a sovereign nation. And, you cannot be a sovereign nation, or at least you cannot eradicate imperial influence and imperial forces in a country if you do not get your ducks in a row. If we do not get our economy growing, we are going to sing that song until kingdom come. We are not in a good position. In fact, I think with our economy growing at such it's not growing, it's stagnant. We are in a much bigger risk for things like imperial influence and all of that stuff that our EFF and all of them stand up against. We don't want imperial influence in our country. We're at a bigger risk because the problem you have, people on the ground, if people are struggling, I'm sure you guys have heard about the story of how Adolf Hitler was able to rule over the Germans and, sort of like push his agenda. It was because at the time when he came into power, Germany was facing a high youth unemployment. Our youth unemployment rate today is higher than what Germany was facing then. As a result of that, he was able to persuade and sway people to do things that were part of his agenda, not the agenda of the greater German country and the success of the German country, right? He was able to sway them because they were not in a good position. So whether it's coming from Solidarity or whatever, the greater issue, the greater problem here, and I'm speaking to the Dumisoles and the Faith Mangopes, people who hold that position, we can say, no, we want to protect South Africa, we want to keep our name. But if we are not growing, and we are in this position where we are not, it's a non-safe country, high murder rate, it's pointless. It literally means nothing. And I hate to be the one to say it, but by the looks of things, the Afrikaans community, and I was looking at another video of this YouTuber. I'm going to put a snippet of the video. I forgot the name of the channel, but he's a really charismatic guy. He's just so adorable. And he visited Orania. I know a lot of other YouTubers have visited Orania, including guys in the media, have visited Orania to see sort of what's happening there. Afrikaans people will get the sovereignty and the sort of independence from imperial forces way before we do. Way before we do as a majority in South Africa. Way before we do, because having high debt, the ANC government has accumulated a lot of debt over the years. The ANC government, because of this strong socialism force, has created a very passive society where we are not doers, we are not starters. And I mean, if you compound all of these things, it leaves our society as sort of the black race in South Africa extremely vulnerable. You know, I was looking at this Zozo Club saga, and just I saw a bit of that video, horrific stuff, and I was just like, what in the Western global influence world is this? What on earth is this? And that's what happens. That is what happens. That stuff was happening in a private establishment, right? Away from what we would have ever known about. Because if we do not get our ducks in a row, there is going to be a lot of elements infiltrating our society. And the Afrikaners will get their way before we do, because they are dead serious. And if we are not going to agree on the fundamentals as a society, as you know, as a society, as a group, as a community, right, in South Africa, and say, these are the fundamentals. No to socialism, no to communism. We have to just say no to those policies. They do not work. It's the easiest thing for government to implement socialism, because growing an economy, helping people, it's hard. Having a good education, that stuff is too hard. Being a socialist government, you just basically say everything will be state. And if you don't like it, there's no democracy often. You know, you basically just control everyone, dictate the way around things, shove people around. It's harder to grow from the bottom up. Then it's much harder to just put socialism where everyone is the same. We all get equal land, equal housing, equal what. And the bigger problem also, when speaking of socialism and communism, if we are too friendly with these policies, if we are too friendly with these things, I always ask the question, when it comes to equal distribution, who gets what when? Who gets in the front when? Now let's say we are distributing, whether it's land, whether it's revenue we make from our minerals, who gets what? We are a population of 56 million if you exclude the other races, just as a black population alone. Who gets what share? Like, honestly, socialism, communism, that stuff is umswatl. It's not gonna work. We need to agree on the fundamentals. We also, at the same time, need to be able to direct our outrage in the right place. We need strong leadership. The African National Congress is not that leadership. We need strong leaders. We need to put the right people in the front. Whoever is good, strong, sensible, dedicated, with integrity, that's the person we want leading in the front. Thank you so much for checking out this video. The comment section is available if you want to share your thoughts on some of the issues that I've brought in this video. That is highly welcome, and I will definitely engage back. But I look forward to seeing you again soon when I drop the next video.